Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my colleague, Simon Kew. This week we cover an almost unprecedented, and I'm pretty sure it is unprecedented, 4 stories. So we take a few seconds to think about the high and rising gilt yields. Simon reports back from a roundtable on the unlocking investment consultation. We also look at longevity stats and how their reliability, and then we close with news from the SPP.
Well, Dave, gilt yields have been in the press again, probably the first time since. Actually, I better not mention it because I might get a cease and desist letter. So tell us what's happened this time, Dave.
Yeah, so gilt yields have been steadily rising, and that increase has been accelerating over the last week or so. And so it's been the big pension story of 2025 so far has been the gilt yields are on the up, and what that means for pension schemes and whether there's any panic given the situation that we cannot say. It's like Macbeth, isn't it? Oh my God, I've said that. Anyway, so gilt yields are rising, and this has implications for DB and DC pension schemes. So sort of focusing on the DB side of things, so schemes might need to look at their hedging ratios and what they've been doing to de-risk in the past and whether that's appropriate now. Schemes that haven't hedged to date or haven't hedged that much might need to look into that and see whether now is the time to lock in some of those gains they might have experienced. All things being equal, with the gilt yields rising, the present value of liabilities will be lower, and if the assets can hopefully increase as well, then funding positions will improve in general. And so people might want to lock that in. So that's something definitely for trustees to consider. Those schemes that have got buyout on their mind, and let's be frank, that's what most of them have, they might have got a bit closer to that target, and so recalibrating where you are. Schemes might have done work towards the end of last year. That probably will be out of date now, given the rises we've seen this year. So checking in with where you are on those targets and those long-term objectives is crucial. And also on the DC side of things, and I think this area is going to be a talking point throughout the year, is basically if schemes have any sort of lifestyling where people over the age of 50, say 55, you gradually get moved out of growth assets and into gilts and cash, sort of this sort of lifestyling move to try to protect you from the ups and downs. Well, you'd have seen some downs because the value of gilts fall as yields rise, and so that's not always great for individuals depending on what they want to do. If you're targeting cash and annuity in the near future, then that's not such a problem, because they'll be just mirroring each other and moving together. But if you're not and targeting to take drawdown and take your income more slowly over the time and keep it invested, then that may not be great. And I hate to use any kind of hyperbolic words, but that is a big issue, I still think, in the world of DC, is that schemes haven't really addressed the issue of lifestyling, whether that is appropriate for everybody, because as we know, since 2014, when we had the Freedoms announcement, annuities have fallen away and people don't tend to buy them anymore. And so the appropriateness of lifestyling is definitely questionable. And then we've had the fact that, we had a period for about 10, 15 years when gilt yields and gilt prices were fairly flat, but they seem to be more volatile now, and that does have material impacts on people's pensions. And so I do think that's something that the industry needs to get fixed sooner rather than later. Okay, Simon, so you were invited to a PPI event and to join DWP and Treasury to discuss the ongoing consultation around unlocking investments to try to get more productive finance. So how did those discussions go?
Yes, Dave, I was there. It was a very, very interesting afternoon, actually. We had, it was all kicked off by Chris Curry of the Pensions Policy Institute, and then we had a keynote from the Pensions Minister, Emma Reynolds, of course. Scale very definitely is the word. It's not grease is the word, scale is the word when it comes to pensions. So looking at the mega funds and how they might work. So you could call this sort of phase 2 of part 1 of the pensions review. Anything that comes out of this, and of course consultations are coming to a close. Is it the end of this week, Dave?
Yes.
The end of this week. Dave is nodding furiously. So the end of this week. So sort of to tie in with that, obviously anything from these could go into the pension schemes bill, which is slated for, he checks notes, June 2025. Pension schemes bill is likely to be put before the House. So the earliest that could be made into law is likely to be April 2026, but that's kind of ambitious. So anything that goes in there later in the year, we're probably looking well over a year before it becomes law anyway. We were under the Chatham House rule, so I won't give away too much of what was discussed. I mean, a lot of the topics are public anyway, as per the consultations. But some interesting discussions around the room. Size can bring benefits, but we were also mindful as well of unintended costs to smaller employers, burdens around VFM, for instance. If qualifying schemes funds are classed as green, and who decides that they're green, again, was a point of discussion. Should it be the IGG's trustees themselves? Not really. So who's going to kick the tires on that? If it's going to be the regulator, then probably the Treasury or DWP needs to make absolutely sure that the regulator is focused on that, because otherwise they'll obviously focus on what they want to focus on rather than what they need to focus on sometimes. So yeah, there's lots of discussion around the edges. We know that scale is coming. Quite how it comes about, obviously, is yet to be seen. But yeah, as I said, scale is the word. Dave, it appears that centenarians are on the rise around the globe, or are they?
Yes. No. So yeah, that's quick.
Yeah, but no, but yeah, but no, but.
Yeah. No, just like that's it. That's done. No. So Dr. Saul Justin Newman has won an Ig Nobel award, which are sort of slight parodies of the Nobel Awards. Nobel. I can't say words today, but they are awards that for people who are doing scientific studies or work, and gives you perhaps an opportunity to have a giggle and then actually think, oh, hang on a minute, that's probably quite important. So he's been looking into so-called blue zones. So you'll have heard over the years about areas of Sardinia or islands in Japan and parts of the Mediterranean where people live long lives thanks to oily fish and sweet potatoes and all these sorts of things that make sure they live a long time. And he's been digging into this data and found that these so-called blue zones are nearly always completely rubbish. So he first looked at Costa Rica. There's a peninsula in Costa Rica where people were living to ripe old ages, over 100, and then it was found out in 2008 that 42% of the people there were lying about their age. And now Costa Rica, which isn't a wealthy country, is now where they probably would not expect them to be, towards the bottom of the longevity list. And then he also turned attention to Greece. So similarly, everyone thought that people in Greece were living long lives, olive oil, living by the sun, and all this kind of stuff. Living by the sun, what is wrong with me? Living by the sea, in the sun. I couldn't let that go because you can't have people living by the sun. That doesn't make any sense. But they
get a little bit toasty if they were living by the sun.
Exactly. Not good for the skin. Not good for the skin. And it was found in 2012 that 200,000 people were claiming pensions that they weren't entitled to because they were claiming they were older than they were, or claiming that people were alive when they weren't. And so he also looked into Tower Hamlets, where in the early 2000s it was claimed that they had 15 people over the age of 100 compared to everyone in Scotland. There's only 3 in Scotland. And again, the data has been reanalyzed and it's been discovered that there's pension fraud going on. And that is one of the key reasons for people lying about their age, is to commit pension fraud and collect pensions for people that have passed away, or getting pensions earlier, saying you are older than you actually are. So really interesting. And I think one of our very first Pensions in 10, we talked about somebody being 120 or something, and then it got on to talking about someone, the oldest person ever was someone in France or something, some lady in France. And a good friend of the podcast messaged me offline to say, yeah, there's a big question marks over that, even that story, that was a pension fraud case. So what's that thing, isn't it? When something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So, I'm not going to start giving health advice, but anyway.
Dave, we have news from one of my top 10 favourite initialisms, the SPP. What's that news?
That stands for the Society of Pension Professionals. Just listener.
I knew that, Dave.
No one left behind. I know you know. So yes, they've done some videos for beginners guide, on some areas of pensions. They've done DB valuations, they've done public sector pensions, CDC, introduction to pensions, and there was one they did earlier on in the year on pensions law, and I think there's one I might have forgotten in the list. But these are great. These are free for anyone to watch. I'd recommend the CDC one because it's one of the most frequent asked questions I ever get when I talk to people about pensions these days. When I say, oh, CDC, and I start waffling on, and then someone, a brave person in the back, says, Dave, what's CDC? And then I try to give them my 1 minute sort of definition, but there's 10, 12 minutes definition, which would be way better than what mine will be. So yeah, keep an eye out for these. Signpost your colleagues, especially new entrants to the business, or those that are unfamiliar with some of these phrases. Let's face it, we don't know everything. So yeah, let's just keep an eye on this stuff. And yeah, thanks to SPP for putting those great videos together.
Well, dear viewer and listener, thank you for staying with us for another Pensions in 10. Whether it's in 10 minutes or not, I haven't the faintest idea. Usually not. It's usually above or below. I think they average out over the year. Anyway, thanks for staying with us. Please do continue to like, subscribe, feedback, collar us in the street. Someone did actually stop me at Waterloo Station last year, believe it or not. Thankfully, they didn't throw me onto the track, so all good. Anyway, keep listening through your favourite podcast provider, fruit-based or otherwise. Watch us on YouTube, or you can find the links to our webpage. Take care. We'll see you next week.